if you say it's a 250 kilowatt station and someone plugs in and gets 172,
Yeah.
and they immediately think, oh, my car's broken, the station's broken. The answer is actually, based on your current state of charge and based on your vehicle, you're perfect.
Very good.
But yeah, and that to me was, okay, instead of trying to explain how they need to be okay with that, at the end of the day, all they care about is once they know they've connected is, when am I going to get back on the road? And so that's where the simple number system came into play. And each of the power levels that we use for Chargeway, currently 1 through 7, we can grow that as the industry grows with technology and we increase on power. So it could go to level 8, level 9, etc. But the beauty of it is it helps to brand and communicate an experience.
Welcome to a new episode of the eMobility Marketing Podcast. Today we're going to talk about something that almost everyone in our industry underestimates. Not infrastructure, not subsidies, not vehicle range. We're going to talk about communication. Because while the EV industry keeps pushing forward technologically, a lot of consumers are still standing on the sidelines. Not because they hate EVs, but because they don't understand them. My guest today is Matt Teske, founder and CEO of Chargeway. Matt has been working on EV adoption for years and is one of the strongest voices I know arguing that clarity, not complexity, is the real goal and growth driver for electric mobility. So Matt, great to have you on the show.
Theo, thank you for having me.
So before we get into Chargeway, I want to start with you personally. You've been in and around EV adoption for a long time. When did you first realize that the biggest problem was not the technology, but how the industry communicates about it?
My first introduction to that problem was the first EV that I bought in 2013. So 13 years ago now. My background's automotive. I've been in the automotive industry for most of my career, working on marketing, communications, branding, things along those lines. And I bought an EV from an automotive mindset and went on a road trip with my wife and screwed it up completely and didn't realize that I had to understand a new experience with not the car, but the fuel. And what I did know, I completely messed up. And that was a jarring moment. And the way that it came, to be presented to me in that way was during that road trip, my wife asked me, she said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "You're a car guy, right?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, if you couldn't do this, how would I do this?"
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought that's a nice way to frame that because it's a very candid question from someone who doesn't have my background. And so that's really that was the seed that was planted that just made me think, I got to dig into this. Like, what did I get wrong? And as I really started diving in, I realized that the information that I had found, even as someone who was enthusiastic about buying an EV, I realized that I didn't have all the information I needed. And then the more I dug into what I needed to know, I began thinking about how do we translate this to the general public, just simply based on that question that my wife asked me. And that's really that was the inception of how do we communicate this better.
Right. And so when you look at the US market today, like what frustrates you most about how EV charging is explained to consumers?
I think the thing that continues to stand out is that there is the narrative and the communication practices that are being driven, whether it's from the energy sector or automotive or enthusiast groups, nonprofits, even government efforts that have been made over the years. It's all steeped in engineering language. And that did work for early adopters, the people that really wanted to learn the technology, that were very excited about buying something different that was foreign to them, where they had to educate themselves. They were willing to and interested digging into those details. And for some reason, the specificity around the technology and the engineering and the electrical engineering and the schematic drawings of plug types and all of that, it has found its way into the marketing communications from everybody. And it still is the case. And in the ways that we've seen some of different entities try to adapt and create something more simple, unfortunately, it's just glossed over things. It's simple on the surface, but that's all it is. It's just made to be entry level. Oh, this isn't that hard, but it doesn't actually help explain how it works. It just makes it seem simple with the underlying issue of the fact that it still is complicated to figure out. And so to me, that's still the major issue of communication practices with the EV industry here in North America.
Okay. And is it like imagine someone in the US is seriously considering their first EV. Like, where does the confusion usually start? Is it at the dealership or when they start Googling or when charging comes into the conversation?
It really depends on the customer. I mean, there are some people that went out and bought an EV because they heard they could get a federal tax credit for it. And so they raced out and saved what in their mind was $7,500, not realizing that it's based on when they file their taxes if they get a credit or not. So little things like that where they found out after the fact for incentivized reasons we were trying to create to get people to buy these cars, they were finding themselves through the customer journey either not having the information presented whatsoever, and then they were figuring it out on the back end, which created problems. And oftentimes we heard stories of people trading the cars back in because they just simply got too frustrated. Or
Right.
it starts at the top of the funnel where people did start looking for information, and when they started getting it, it started to overwhelm. And we see it very often on owner groups, on social media, on subreddits where people are asking questions, where they'll ask a very basic question about charging and they'll get, a 500-word dissertation
Yeah.
response from somebody, and they'll respond saying, is there a better way or an easier way to do this? And the answer is that's where Chargeway comes in, and that's what we've been working on developing for a long time. And we've
Mhm.
got a lot of evidence that we've been successful at that. But the inertia that we're fighting is that there's a lot of enthusiasts that help make this industry what it is in North America, and those are early adopter mindset people, and the people that are inside of the automakers, the dealerships, the utility companies, the nonprofits. They've all just been kind of building the plane as they were flying it as it related to getting the product out there. And they kept acting like, well, we'll just figure out how to communicate it once the product's out there. And
Mhm.
that's just a fool's errand. So
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And you already mentioned charging. Like that seems to be the moment where the confidence drops. Usually, like plug, standard speeds, kilowatts, apps, like networks. From your perspective, like which part of that is explained the worst today?
well, I think the biggest challenge is that, we have the best example is kilowatt and kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
And I've been tracking this just internally, with our own feedback we get and research that we do. The amount of people that refer to the charging speed of a charging station as kilowatt hour because they are subconsciously thinking of time. And so they just call that a kilowatt hour, 350
Yeah. Yeah.
kilowatt hour,
Mm.
whatever it might be.
Mm.
That's very frequent. And
Mhm.
the challenge of trying to educate the general public on saying, no, kilowatt hour that's a measurement of stored energy. Kilowatt is a measure of power. That's what I mean, at the end of the day, it just doesn't matter.
Mhm.
An average consumer that needs to buy a vehicle they can rely on needs to know how far it goes, how fast they can fill it up, where they can fill it up, and how many chargers are available. Those are the basics, and that's what we've attacked with Chargeway of trying to simplify. But to your question about which elements are predominantly the worst here in North America, I think the biggest challenge is in North America we don't discuss kilowatt hour anytime ever, or kilowatt. If you go around the world, there are countries that consumers regularly engage with that terminology
Yeah.
because they're more personally owning it as it relates to solar or things like that that's taken off in other countries maybe more effectively. But in the United States, that just simply isn't the case. People get their energy bill, they just pay whatever the total is and they move on. They don't
Mhm.
understand the technology, they just pay it and go. So that to me is at the heart of it, is the engineering terminology around electricity is really not, it's just something we can't translate to the general public. And to me, it's because if you do a SWOT analysis, you just look at what have they been using for decades. What is the incumbent product we're trying to ask them to switch from? They call it regular or premium here in the United States, and it takes them 5 minutes, and that's how it's referred to at every
Right.
fueling station they go to. So
Mhm.
that to me is where there's been just such a huge misstep in understanding we need to appreciate that it's too complex to explain kilowatt and kilowatt hour. And then that leads down the pipeline to things like plug type names, plug type shapes, voltage, amperage, all of those
Yeah.
factors that also play a role. That's just deeper down the rabbit hole that makes people very intimidated.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with what you say. Like for the average consumer or the EV driver, they don't care. They just want to charge and learn how that works, and that's it, and whatever we call it. And that's what I also keep telling CPOs these days. Like, stop talking about 300 kilowatt chargers because nobody cares. They just want to know, can I charge? Is it fast? Like, when is it done? That's it, and continue my trip.
Yeah.
Um, and like that also gets me to my next question. Like, do you think the industry sometimes hides behind technical language because it feels safer than simplifying the message?
I don't know if to be honest, I think that's giving the industry too much credit. I don't think they think
Mhm.
about it that deeply. I mean, that's my opinion. And for all the conversations I have had, I don't
Yeah.
think they're hiding behind it because, well, I guess maybe to your question, maybe it is they're not consciously thinking about it. But the thing that is intimidating is how do you take that information and distill it down into a communication language that is actually easy for everyone?
Yeah.
And that's what we addressed with Chargeways. We said, okay, we're not going to be effectively training auto dealerships to explain the differences between CCS combo, SAE standard fast charging, J1772, CHAdeMO. Now there's NACS. NACS is also, Tesla, because not every Tesla station is a NACS station.
Yeah.
We're never going to get a dealership sales rep that's been selling gas cars for 5 or 20 years to figure that out. So that, to me, do I think they're hiding behind it? I think the challenge is they are very hard. I mean, there's a ton of hardworking people in this space, building the cars, building the hardware, building the software, building the infrastructure, making the policies happen. These people are all working very hard, and they're all very intelligent. None of them are communication experts.
No,
And
exactly.
to
Yeah.
me, that's the challenge, is that
Yeah.
so many of these decisions have been made without people in the room who've just held their hand up and said, all that sounds great, but how do we help, Bob and Jane consumer understand what you all just said? And then in the realm of the United States and just capitalism being capitalism, you know, the government will say we can't choose winners. We got to just let it play out.
Yeah.
That's where NACS has, obviously, had some influence here in the US, but, for plug type standardization. But at the end of the day, we do have to have a discussion around how we do communicate this, because if we don't get it right, we've already seen the last 10 years what happened, and politically how things can change in the US is that you can spend billions of dollars and literally have a lot of stranded assets and have a lot of money that just basically goes poof. And
Yeah.
and I just look at that and I think EVs are great products. They are very great products. The challenge is you have to get people encouraged to go in and buy them based on what they understand. And it might be a beautiful car that goes 300 miles, but if they don't trust how to fill it up again and again and again to use it like the car they've always known, they're never going to run in and buy it if it runs on a fuel they don't understand. And
Yeah.
then if they're presented with complicated information about how they should learn about it, they're just going to stick with what they know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Have you seen more examples, Matt, where poor communication actually stopped someone from buying an EV?
Oh, all the time. I
Yeah.
mean, we've encountered ourselves in just going to events and talking to people. We see it on a regular basis online where people will go to owners groups and say, I'm considering buying this car. Would love to get everybody's opinion on the vehicle, and we see a smattering of responses. But then when they start to ask questions around their particular lifestyle or use case, if it's someone who says, hey, I can't charge at home, I street park, what are my best options for how I can fill up, and what does that look like? You then start to see how they get inundated with a lot of information all at once. And that especially is where I've seen oftentimes where they become very hesitant. And at the same time, my 2 cents on that is if they decide I'm going to go buy a hybrid and not just a typical gas car, they might get a more fuel efficient car. And I think that's where a lot of people might start. But you can own an electric car without having home charging in many geographic areas of the United States and obviously outside of the US.
Yeah.
But you have to have a way to understand how to visualize where that infrastructure is for your use case. And that's based on the vehicle you select, its plug type, and its charging capabilities. That has to be translated so that you can understand what you do as a driver. And then your kingdom of charging then has to be visualized to you so you know what to expect when you arrive. And that, to me, is what the industry has just completely missed the mark on. But that's what we've been working on with Chargeway, is that exact visualization.
Right, right. And in terms of that messaging, like obviously you're leading in that space with Chargeway, like you're taking leadership on that. Is it also how you see this moving forward? Like who should own this clarity in the ecosystem? Are those the automakers, the charge point operators, or the solution providers, or like any other marketing teams in the industry?
Well, that's the challenge that we've seen just here in the US and in North America in general, is that everybody wants to own the driver and user experience. And I get that. You got a business to run,
Yeah,
but we can't all be saying the same thing in 17 different ways. That doesn't benefit drivers or the public or accelerating EV adoption. It just creates more chaos. And that was always our goal, was to say, if we develop out a universal way to explain this easily that everybody can apply to their effort, whether that's an EV charging network, or whether that's a vehicle, that's or again an advocacy group that's trying to communicate it just even verbally, that's going to be a win for everyone.
mm,
But we've certainly have encountered over the years, there's a lot of the not invented here syndrome, where we go in and present and say, this is what we can offer you and we can partner with you. You can use our solutions. Let's have that discussion. But then it turns into, well, we think what you've done is easy because it looks easy. And so we're just going to come up with our own way of doing it. And there's always a lack of comprehensive understanding around what we did research and develop. And it then starts to reveal itself as these products come to market. We've seen that a lot, very often. But the lessons are being learned. And that reset that's now happening here in North America with the EV market is because of those, those missteps. And we're getting a lot more just general engagement and just natural inquiry from different stakeholders now who are saying, we'd like to revisit what you've been working on because we're starting to realize the value of it more. So that's
Yeah.
a good sign, but a lot of damage has been done in that process, and we're going to have to dig out of that hole.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess a lot of that also comes from the fact that we have relied heavily on early adopters, obviously, people who are willing to figure things out themselves and really like the data and the technology. But now we move into like more mainstream buyers. So we have to explain everything in a
Yeah.
very clear and easy to understand way. So that's where these challenges come from. Um, let's talk a bit about Chargeway because I really liked what you've built. Like it's a very clear response to this problem, and instead of adding more information, you reduce it to colors and numbers. Like, why was that so important to you?
What I wanted to figure out was, how do I have a conversation with people that aren't as enthusiastic about EVs as I am and explain the thing that I got wrong as quickly as possible so they can say, oh, that makes sense. Okay, that's
Right.
easy. And
Yeah.
that's really what I wanted to identify. And what we boiled it down to was, there's a lot of different complexities and variances that go along with the experience that you will personally have as an EV
Hmm.
driver based on the car you select, the station options that you can go to, and then that turns into, what do you need to know about those experiences? Well, it's, can I connect here? How long will I wait for my fill up so I know how this impacts my life? And
Yeah.
then the details underneath that are, what's it going to cost me and are they available to use?
Hmm.
And so those factors are at just, that's a baseline of what every driver will need to know. And
Hmm.
so, how do you cut through the noise to give a personalized experience to every driver around those topics? And the first and foremost being, can I connect here and how long will I wait? That was just simply looking at the, the landscape of the industry and saying, well, schematic drawings and engineering plug names are already intimidating to people that are coming from I get regular.
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
so I thought, okay, how do we identify something that allows them to know they can just go there and connect? Well, that's where the colors came in to translate plug type. And then for power level, it turned into, how do we show them power level, not by trying to explain kilowatt, because kilowatt is a moving target based on amperage and voltage,
Hmm.
based on the battery, pack voltage of the vehicle, based on the voltage offered from the station, the amperage of the coupler. So all those factors that make kilowatt a moving target, if you say it's a 250 kilowatt station and someone plugs in and gets 172,
Yeah.
and they immediately think, oh, my car's broken, the station's broken. The answer is, actually, based on your current state of charge and based on your vehicle, you're perfect.
Very good.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and that to me was, okay, instead of trying to explain how they need to be okay with that, at the end of the day, all they care about is, once they know they've connected, is, when am I going to get back on the road? And so
Hmm.
that's where the simple number system came into play. And each of the power levels that we use for Chargeway, currently 1 through 7, we can grow that as the industry grows with technology and we increase on power. So it
Yeah.
could go to level 8, level 9, etc. But the beauty of it is it helps to brand and communicate an experience. So if you have a vehicle that can charge, let's say, up to 150 kilowatt, that vehicle is level 6 capable.
Right.
And then if you go to a level 6 charger, you can charge up in about 30 to 40 minutes if you want to go from, near empty to 80%. You
Yeah.
start to have a branded experience with, that 6 was 30 to 40 minutes. The 5 was about an hour and 15 minutes. The 4 was about 2 hours. The 3 was, and so when they look at the map, they don't have to figure out charging curve. They don't have to figure out amps and volts. They can
Mhm.
say, oh, if I'm going to go to that 5, it's about an hour and 15-minute fill up. Well, I'll grab lunch, maybe do some shopping.
Right.
That's all they
Yeah.
need to know, and that's what
Yeah.
that's what Chargeway's visual language creates for that, and then we back it up with software that does all those calculations for every EV.
And so when you launched Chargeway, like how did the market respond to that? Like was there any skepticism or like were people cheering for you because this is exactly what we need? Like what happened?
Um, Honestly, again, I first introduced Chargeway publicly. It'll be 9 years ago this
Okay.
June.
Yeah.
So it's been a decade of my life basically that I've been working on this.
Yeah.
And prior to that, there was years of research that I did. And so, but when we first introduced it, the response was positive from everybody because everybody acknowledged, boy, it's really difficult to explain this to anybody, whether they're in a showroom or at a ride and drive or whatever it
Yeah.
might, or a friend you're talking to. So everybody immediately said, this is awesome. But quickly we identified that every stakeholder, automakers, dealers, utilities, networks, policymakers, advocate groups, they all said the same thing, which was, well, how do you make this work for us? We like
Mhm.
it, but how do you make it work for our needs as an individual company? And so that's where we started to look at, okay, who can we work with first to showcase that we've developed a brand agnostic but holistic solution that can reach as many people as they need. And so the first stakeholders we've worked with predominantly were electric utility companies because they serve, again, potentially millions of consumers depending on their service area.
Mhm.
And those consumers might rent, they might own a home, and then they might choose one EV or another EV. So they need to have an ability to communicate their fuel, electricity, in a way that makes sense to each of those individual customers. So we had a lot of great feedback and a lot of great data we got off of pilot programs with utilities that has led to deeper conversations with other stakeholders, including networks and automakers.
Okay.
We've done a lot of testing with auto dealers for training where they have all, again, unanimously said, this is far better than anything else we've been given from our automakers, because the automakers will just hand them the engineering language and say, it's okay, this car has a CCS connector and a J1772 AC connector, so you got to explain that. And
Yeah.
every dealership we've worked with has said, no, this is better to just say, you buy this and you go to green stations, and the fastest you can do at home is a green 2, and we can get one for you.
Mm.
I mean, that's the
Yeah.
beauty of the language is it translates into multiple languages. Is
Right.
its color and number is universal. You can go into any geographic area, any cultural area, and you can either say, this is a green 2 or a verde dos, and it works. And that's the beauty of the language, is that instead of trying to come up with some just creative visual graphic to identify power or something,
Mhm.
any human can look at numbers in a row and say, I get it. 4 is better than 3 for speed. So it really was designed in that sense to be that simple for those reasons. And the success we've had is there. It's just now that we are, again, the response, as you asked, it was very positive at first, but then as people began to see that what we had developed was fundamental, we did see a branching out of people just trying to figure out how to do it their own way.
Okay.
And the truth of the matter is as my father, who's an engineer, said to me when I first showed him my idea about this basically a decade ago, is he said, you can't make it any easier than that. It's
Right.
like colors and
Okay.
numbers.
Yeah.
There's nothing weird about it. There's no shapes and lines and additional lightning bolts and weird stuff. He just said that right there is a slam dunk for simplicity. And as an
Mm.
engineer, I appreciate what you're trying to do. So
Right. Well, that's a nice compliment, and that
yeah,
shows you that you're in the right direction, right? That's
yeah.
yeah. So if Chargeway were widely adopted across vehicles and charging networks that we just talked about, like what would fundamentally change for EV drivers? Is it
Well,
just the kind of the simplicity of understanding how things work and where to go, where not to go?
I think the way that I phrase it to anybody that's in the industry that's having that question of like, how do we increase adoption? Like, why is it we're still floating around 7 or 8% of new car buyers? And my response is, look, the general public is not going to rush into auto dealerships to demand cars that run on a fuel they don't understand.
Hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the ball game. And so my assertion is, if we can take something like Chargeway and integrate that into every vehicle, every network, simply as a way of just saying, look, this is what we offer in the fuel option. Because that's what we have to explain to people in a way that is easy to grasp, is
Yeah.
the fuel option is universally understood across no matter what car you buy, no matter what network you decide to stop at, no matter what city you're in, no matter what utility you might get your electricity from. Speaking a common language around electricity as a fuel type is going to be beneficial to all of those stakeholders. Now, I recognize that a lot of people, they just look at it and they say, well, this one company came up with this idea. Well,
Yeah.
that's not fair. And I've had many people that have worked in policy over the years say to me, you did the work of the government. You
Mm.
basically did the job that people in government should have done to figure out how to translate all these stakeholder necessities around this.
Yeah.
But to that point, it really does boil down to, if we can get adoption, again, look at, for example, Ford saying, all right, forget it. We're just going to go with the NACS connector because we want to have access to superchargers.
Mhm.
And then every other automaker went, we're in.
Yeah.
We'll do the same thing. It takes one major player to stick their neck out a bit and say, this is better for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that the communication aspect of electricity as a fuel type and the issues we've encountered around, who's been trying to explain it, the automakers have been reliant on a lot of consultants and, feedback they've gotten from energy sector employees, the networks that they've been relying on for data, for example. So I don't foresee that it's going to be something that is solved by the networks, because
Hmm.
at the end of the day, they all want people to come to their charters and not the other
Yeah.
company's charters.
Yeah.
I think that the auto industry has an opportunity to be a leader in this, in the same way they did around the NACS connector here in North America,
Hmm.
as it relates to how we communicate it. So that's my hope, is that all the investment that has been made by both, pure EV brands like Tesla and Rivian and Lucid and others that are coming, like Slate, but all of the legacy brands that need to communicate this better, they all figured out how to do that with the gasoline experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they realized, look, we make the car, we send it to people with another industry to get the fuel. There's no need for us to try to complicate that or own it in a weird way. I think there's been a blurring of reality with some of the legacy brands thinking, well, we need to figure out how to now own this experience the way that Tesla did. So we got to figure out how to do it too. The problem is they just simply don't have an ecosystem like Tesla's,
Hmm.
where they actually do own everything: software, infrastructure, battery development, all of that. They are piecemealing out their solutions still a lot. So, but I think there is an opportunity for that stakeholder. As an example, the utilities, I first thought they could do it, but they unfortunately they're so heavily regulated here in the United States that
Hmm.
much of their efforts for communication gets stifled by public utility
Okay.
commissions oftentimes, and that's a very big bureaucratic hill to climb. So I think, automakers, they have an opportunity here.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And yeah, if you look at EV brands today, let's talk about marketing a bit. Like, what's the single biggest communication mistake that you see that almost everyone makes? Like, besides like Chargeway and the things we just talked about, but is there anything else that you feel like, hey, this is something that we could definitely improve, and that's where EV brands need to kind of step up and make things better?
Well, I think the one thing I've noticed over time is when the automakers want to spend money on advertising and really go gangbusters, they know how to do it. I mean, they can. But is their messaging actually capturing the right message?
Hmm.
And is it resonating in the way that they need? And I think the thing that is true about owning an EV and just EV technology in general is it is an evolutionary step in vehicle ownership. And a lot of the legacy auto brands have had to contend with, how do we maintain our brand equity that we have built for a century, possibly, and carry that into this new technological version of the product we've been making for a long time. I think that has been a big challenge for a lot of them. And you look at brands like Ford, for example, bringing out the Mustang Mach-E and the F-150 Lightning. These are their heritage brands, or heritage models rather, they've had for a long
Yeah.
time. They wanted to maintain showing that the thing that we've been is what we're going to be moving forward as well. But I think that, again, by the F-150 Lightning being canceled, I think it's just an example of, there was kind of an effort to just, let's get to market fast, let's show we can compete. And but here we are with a lot of these brands saying this didn't pan out how we wanted. We didn't have the uptick that we wanted. So as it relates to their marketing, and I think there just is a need for representing that it is an evolutionary step, and it isn't just necessarily the same thing they've always been. It's just electric now. And
Yeah.
partly too is the automakers, as an example, they just simply have relied on doing things the way they've always done, which is it's about brand, it's about
Yeah.
brand language, styling, the visual language of the vehicle itself. And that's something you can bank on for a while. But when it requires learning how to use something new, that's something that which is about the fuel experience, they genuinely did not translate that well in their marketing, whether that's advertising or dealerships or anything. But then as it relates to marketing for the charging networks and utilities, there is none.
Right.
I mean, the utilities in America, the marketing that they do is for EVs especially has been just embarrassingly bad. It's just
Okay.
it's not good. The networks, frankly, just don't have big budgets for doing marketing. And a lot of their existence has been based on getting grants from either state level,
Mm.
utility level programs, and then federal level, obviously through the NEVI program here in the United States. And their effort is, we got to get the hardware in the ground, and they're making that effort. We're starting to see, some brands get more focused onto the marketing side of it. Some of the efforts being done by Ayana and some of the newer
Yeah.
newcomers here in the U.S. But again, it's still very weak as it relates to expressing to the world there is a new fuel option for you. I've said for years, electric fuel is a product, and it has not been
Yeah,
marketed here
that's
in
a
the
good one.
U.S.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's the
Yeah.
biggest gap to me, is that product is still unmarketed to the public in the United States.
Yeah, and this is a lot about education. That's what I always keep telling people. Like, and also in marketing, it's not just about selling your product, but it's also about educating the market. So in the end, like every company in the e-mobility space will benefit from that if we all do a piece of that.
Mm.
Do you agree with this? Like, do you also see that education is clearly missing at the moment?
Well, there's been a lot of efforts made for education. I mean, countless, and there's been millions spent on it here in the U.S.
Hmm. Okay.
I think that the efforts that have been made, there's been just, to be honest, I just see a lot of repetition of the communication efforts and strategies that have
Hmm.
been around for honestly 15 plus years or more sometimes.
Yeah.
And it just isn't, it's not resonating with a broader audience. And some of the efforts that I've seen made where it's okay, we need to find a way to capture a broader audience. They'll go out and find a celebrity or a comedian, and they will pay that
Yeah.
person
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be their spokesperson.
Right.
But then that comedian or spokesperson or celebrity will just repeat the same talking points again that don't
Yeah.
resonate with people.
Yeah.
And I'm probably gonna go to my grave saying it, but I just don't think the general public, especially in the United States, where car culture is fundamental to just being an American. I
Mm.
just do not see a broad mass market response to electric vehicle interest if we maintain acting like electricity as a fuel doesn't need to be marketed. It does need to be marketed because everywhere you turn in the US, there is branding around gasoline that has
Right.
been ingrained into Americana for decades.
Yeah.
And that has to be met at that moment with saying, electricity as a fuel is a product, and then explaining the benefits of it. If you want a 15-minute fill up, yes, that is possible. But if you want to fill up at home for less than $10,
Yeah.
that's also possible. Now, those arguments, the industry might say, we make those arguments all the time. And then my response is, that's true. You might say that in a marketing piece or at an event or whatever it might be. But then when someone has a question about the talking point you used, that's when you get into these rabbit holes of complexity and confusion that you need to be very appreciative around the fact that that scares people. That
Yeah.
truly does. And I think that the gap there is that if we don't help the public realize they have a fuel choice, and that fuel is electricity and it's reliable and they can see it, they can actually see it places. Tesla is finally putting up their logo on the blue, amenities signs here in the United States on
Hmm.
highways where it says
Yeah.
fuel. Then it says charging, Tesla supercharger.
Yeah.
That's the first that's happened in the US. It started basically, I don't know, sometime last year. That's crazy, because
Yeah.
the way that we've done it as a country is we've just basically taken a little sign that looks like a gas pump, but it just says EV on it, and just stapled it to the wooden post at the
Yeah.
bottom
Yeah.
of those. And the government went,
Done.
see,
Check.
see?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
sign. And my
Yeah.
response is, okay, person that decided that, I'm driving this EV. Can you tell me what network, what plug type, and what power that is? Because that matters. And they just kind of
Yeah.
go, well, they can figure it out, right? My response is, be prepared for no one to buy this.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Because that's not how you sell a product.
No, indeed. And shouldn't we talk more about the benefits of driving an EV? Like, there's so much more you could do compared to like an ICE vehicle, right? So I also sometimes feel like we should be talking much more about that, to making people aware that it's not just replacing your current vehicle, but it also has a lot of additional benefits. But I feel no one is talking about that, or not enough.
I think the homeowner opportunity, if you're a homeowner, the benefits of an
Yeah.
EV are fantastic, because
Mhm.
you genuinely don't fill up away from home unless you're on a road trip. And
Yeah.
road tripping in the US, it is a part of car ownership. But
Mhm.
I think if you own a home, the sell-through rate of how you could show the benefits of an EV are far more obvious. If
Mhm.
you are someone who rents in street parks and you don't have access to dedicated charging at night, for example, then that discussion is a very different value
Yeah,
proposition
that's true.
discussion.
Yeah.
And to me, that's where there's a failure point that happens often in how the values discussion starts.
Mhm.
Is you'll see someone pose a question in an owners group where they might ask a question about charging and convenience of it, and someone will immediately just jump in and say, like, why are you concerned about this? You just plug in at night and you're full in the morning. Like
Yeah.
that's that, and then the person responds saying, well, I don't have a house. So there's a lot of advocacy of people that are living their own life saying,
Hmm.
this is why it's amazing, not appreciating that that might not be the opportunity that person has.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
to me, that's the value discussion it oftentimes starts from a perspective of these are all great benefits, but we haven't appreciated the fact that the ownership experience is based on your lifestyle and the values might be, 3 of 5, 1 of 5, 5 of 5 based on your personalized experience. And that is completely different from the gas car ownership. The
Yeah.
gas car ownership experience, you could be rich and live in the hills and have a mansion and driving a Bentley, or you could be renting a room from a friend in Street Park driving a 20-year-old Honda Civic. You will both pull up at the same gas
Yeah.
station,
Yeah. Exactly.
just
Yeah.
stare at each other and kind of go,
Yeah.
"Hey man, you're rich and I'm poor, but whatever."
Yeah.
But you both get the same gas, and that
Yeah.
was the unifier forever. Electricity is
Yeah.
fuel, completely different, and that means you have to think about the value proposition discussion differently.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a fair point indeed. Now, if you look 5 years ahead, like, do you expect the North American EV market to become clearer or more confusing for consumers?
Well, with the political landscape right now, there's a lot to be considered for what the next at least three. Well, I mean, depending on how things happen with the midterm elections here in the United States,
Hmm.
coming up this year, maybe something could change in the next 3 years. I don't think it'll be really all that big, frankly. How EVs have been politicized here in the U.S. is just kind of bonkers.
Yeah.
I think some of the biggest damage done to EVs, especially in the United States, is for years every brand was chasing Tesla. Everybody was like, okay, Tesla's market cap is insane.
Yeah.
They're worth $1 trillion. Everybody seems to love them. Elon is just everywhere. But the moment that Tesla went from being just this brand that stood out, that was leading the technological front on EVs, and their, very gregarious CEO became part of the political discussion here in the United
Yeah.
States, the damage done in it for what happened along those lines, it not only damaged Tesla in some people's minds, namely early adopters and ardent believers of EVs. These were these are people that looked at what he was doing politically and said, I don't agree with you.
Yeah.
This is not who you've even been for years. That had damaged not only to the Tesla brand, but once Tesla went from this just rocket that was going to the moon, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden it started to sputter, it gave the ability and an opportunity for the brands that were chasing Tesla to pump the brakes and say, "Oh, well, if we don't have to chase Tesla anymore,
Yeah.
because
Exactly.
why bother?" And I think that is going to have that we're going to be digging out of that result here in the
Yeah.
U.S. And again, it's not as simple as just as what I just said. There's a lot more nuance to it, obviously, but there's a lot of other factors that at play. But at face value, that politicized EV discussion here in the U.S. is going to have an impact for a long time. However, I think this year will be a very interesting data point as it relates to EVs that are coming off of lease. That
Yeah.
there's going to be about 1 million of them, I think. I mean, that's the data that we're seeing. There's a lot of EVs that were compelling 3 years ago that cost anywhere from $70 to $100,000 that now are going to be on the used market for 40,000, maybe less.
Hmm.
And we're going to start seeing a lot of people getting into EVs because they have heard about something from a friend and they're like, I did want to get it, but I can't afford that car, but now I can.
Yeah.
And I think that we'll start to see a broader discussion with a broader audience that are buying cars that they can now maybe afford that are a couple years old, but that still requires explaining that lifestyle user experience based on who they are, where they live, and what they bought in a way that
Exactly.
they can understand. Otherwise, we're going to potentially see a lot of used EVs sitting on dealer lots, just like the new ones were, because again, if the public doesn't understand this new fuel, they're not going to rush in to buy cars that run on that new fuel that they don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Matt, like, why should every EV driver in North America start using Chargeway?
Our goal is to take the experience and make it yours as a driver. Not here's a map with everything on it and you get to go in and figure out how to filter it, and then there's still pins on a map, but there's even differences in those pins. So you got to click on the pin to figure out. I mean, we wanted to take the things that you need to know and make them very easy to see quickly.
Hmm.
And for those who are advocates for EVs that want their friends to buy EVs and family members to buy EVs and just more people to buy EVs, this is the path forward for how we communicate. Is we have to appreciate that not everybody thinks like early adopters, like I am and many others are. We do need to appreciate if we're going to get more people to say yes, or go from just being curious to saying, that actually didn't sound that scary. And also it just turns into, how do we, like what can Chargeway do for this discussion it is about each individual driver and giving them ownership over the experience that is tailored to them. And to me, that is something that automakers are trying to figure that out, but we have a platform that does that. So if you're an EV owner today, download Chargeway and add it,
Yeah.
and the experience is customized to you. And if you're shopping for EV, download Chargeway and add every EV you're shopping for, and you can see how each EV is different for you. And I think that's to me is the path forward. Is we need to appreciate that how we've been doing things, it clearly didn't crack through the wall to get to everybody. The skepticism is still there.
Yeah.
And Chargeway is a path forward to break through that skepticism by creating simplicity and comfort.
Okay. Yeah, and I have one final question, actually, Matt. Like, if you could send one message to the entire e-mobility industry, what would it be?
Wow, globally or just in North America?
I would say globally.
I think that, and again, this differs from geography and country to country. As I mentioned at the beginning, where in the United States, I oftentimes refer to the phrase energy ownership and just personal energy that we haven't really had in the U.S. We've relied heavily on large corporations for gas, electricity, et cetera, and we just kind of pay our bills and complain. Around the globe, there are, again, Europe, especially places in Africa I've seen where people are directly engaged with their energy production and how they engage with their personal energy. To me, that's something that we need to lean in on in a way that we can showcase that it's not about a reliance on something outside of you. It's about how you can take control over that, and it benefits you financially, but it also benefits you personally. There's the clean energy discussion as well. But to me, I think it really boils down to how do we translate to the world and the public and empower people to understand that energy is not something that is outside of your control. It is something that you can have a direct relationship with that will benefit you in ways that you probably have never heard of or thought of before. That's the biggest challenge, I think, in the US. I think more broadly around the world, I think then it really is just to focus on a clean energy discussion and why clean energy is what you can own, where dirty energy and fossil fuels, it's something that you've had to go get.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
you're not going to be drilling into your backyard and making your own oil well, but
Yeah.
you certainly can put in solar and batteries and own your own experience for energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have the opportunity to make things better. So yeah, let's grasp it and get it done. So Matt, thanks for the conversation. Is there anything that you would like to add that we haven't talked about yet?
No, we've covered a lot, obviously, and this is a big conversation, especially if you're looking from a global perspective. But for here in North America and for the U.S., where we're based, is I really, again, I do invite people to download Chargeway if they have an EV, if they're interested in an EV, just give it a shot and see the difference of how what we've done is a more elegant way of communicating something that is very complicated,
Yeah.
and then take that experience and then try it out with people that you've talked to before about EVs that may have kind of given you the cold shoulder and say, what about this? What if it's as easy as you go to green stations and higher number means faster charging? And
Yeah,
this is where
exactly.
all of it is.
Yeah.
Give that a shot. I think there's a lot of people that will really enjoy it. So.
Okay, cool. So we'll make sure that we share the link in the show notes. And again, Matt, thanks for being here. Like for me, it was a great reminder that adoption does not fail because people dislike electric vehicles, but it fails when we fail to explain them properly. And for everyone listening, like if this episode resonated, share it with someone in your team who works on marketing, product, or customer education. And as always, thanks for listening to the eMobility Marketing Podcast. Thanks, Matt, for being here.
Thank you, Theo.